In 75, I was in Las Vegas with Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. The show was over and went in the bar right outside. And there's this has-been on the stage named Kenny Rogers. Somehow he knew I worked with Conway and Loretta. He took a break and came over to my table and introduced himself. And he said, Michael, I'm going to be a country star. I found that to be interesting, but I humored him and went, oh, I think that'll work. So we swapped cards. A day or two later, I talked to the promoter for Conway and Loretta, a guy named Keith Fowler, and I said, what do you think about him? And he goes, Mike, I heard some of his tapes. I think that cat could do something. At that time, I had a couple of step van vehicles, so I gave Kenny one of those for free, and I gave him 2 people to drive it. About 6 months later, Lucille becomes just this huge hit. And about 3 months later than that, we're in Dallas, Texas at Reunion Arena, sold out, 20,000 tickets, Kenny Rogers with Dottie West opening, and you know the rest of the story. In the 60s, there were high school gyms and National Guard armories, so that's where the rock shows played. But there was no such thing as concert lighting, and in fact, when these artists came to these high school gyms, they played with the ceiling lights on. I went to a concert with my sister and saw that, and I said, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I need to be involved in that. The next show that came the next month, I went to the theater of the school, and I drug the lights down to the gymnasium, put them on the handrails around the stage. The band came in at 3 o'clock, set their own equipment up, had the road manager guy, and they said, what is this? And I said, well, you're going to have lights tonight. I was 12 years old,
No.
So I was just a kid.
How many people were helping you?
There were 6 of us
Okay.
from 1968 to 1973. It's what we call the original Bandits.
This episode of the Gigs Podcast is brought to you by Stage Water, a mission-driven premium canned water created for the artists, the crews, and the fans who live for live music. Stage Water donates 15% of all profits to support the mental, physical, and emotional well-being of the music industry through their partnerships with Music Cares, Backline, NEVA, Music Health Alliance, and the Roadie Clinic. Whether it's backstage, on stage, or in the crowd, Stage Water brings purpose to hydration, helping to keep the people behind the scenes going strong. To learn more, visit stagewater.com and help keep the music flowing. A big thank you to our Tier 1 directory sponsors, Round the Clock Logistics and The Greatest Show Events, for supporting the gigs community and helping keep the industry moving. Welcome to the Gigs Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Sanz, founder and CEO of Gigs, the professional career platform for the live event industry. On this podcast, we are hearing everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the unreal moments from the very best in the touring and live event industry. Today's guest doesn't just work in live entertainment. He helped build the modern touring industry as we know it. Michael Strickland is the founder and chairman of Bandit Lights. He started the company at 12 years old, grew it while working as Kenny Rogers' production manager, turned it into a global leader, serving artists like Queen, Aerosmith, Garth Brooks, Carrie Underwood, Jason Aldean, and hundreds more. He's also an advocate for the live event workforce, testifying before Congress, leading pandemic relief efforts, and helping pass the Save Our Stages Act. Michael is the only non-musician to ever receive both a CMA and ACM award, and he's also earned everything from Pollstar's Heroes of Live Award to the Parnelli Lifetime Visionary Award. It's an honor to welcome Michael Strickland to the Gigs Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nikki. I appreciate it.
Well, you told me a story when we were at Pollstar in LA a couple months back that I just thought, I need to get you in this chair, and I want you to start out with this story where were you when touring really started to become an industry? Can you tell me that first moment where you stepped in?
Yeah, most people don't realize what touring is today isn't what it was in the 60s. In the 60s and in the 50s, musicians traveled in station wagons and big bands traveled in a Winnebago-style vehicle. And the only professionals were the musicians. The bigger bands had one person that mixed the sound and got the paycheck, and that was really it. In 1968, I'm from Kingsport, Tennessee, and they built Dobbins-Bennett High School, built a new school, and it had a gym that had air conditioning and no poles, and that was unique. And in a moment, we got the Monkees, the Beach Boys, Paul Revere and the Raiders, the Dave Clark Five, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, the Grassroots, a number of big-name rock shows. Now, for this backwater little town, that was unique. And you have to know at that point in time, there were no big basketball arenas. There were high school gyms and National Guard armories. So that's where the rock shows played.
Wow.
But there was no such thing as concert lighting. And in fact, when these artists came to these high school gyms, they played with the ceiling lights on. And so I went to a concert with my sister and saw that, and I said, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I need to be involved in that. So the next show that came the next month, I went to the theater of the school and I drug the lights down to the gymnasium, put them on the handrails around the stage, and in came I don't remember who, because who knew where it would lead. But one of the bands I mentioned, and the band came in at 3 o'clock, set their own equipment up, had the road manager guy, and they said, what is this? And I said, well, you're going to have lights tonight. And I was 12 years old.
No.
So I was just a kid. And what I didn't know, while I was doing this in Kingsport, Tennessee, Bob C. was doing it in New York, and Bob Stern was doing it in L.A., and it was happening in California and New York and the Fillmore, and all these things were beginning to happen. But these were adults. And I was just a kid. Word worked around within the industry very, very slowly that, there's this other guy in this area doing what we're doing in our area. While we never knew each other, anything we did was right. And it all started with overhead projectors and slide projectors and light bulbs like you put on the side of your home, and extension cords and household switches. And again, there was not levels and levels of people. There was just the band of the one person and then you. And everything was so crude. And so anything we did was correct. But again, it was easy because everything we did was right. It was usually wrong at the same time, but it was also right.
Right.
So we sort of grew from 68, 69, 70 to just this really free-form thing. And as time marched on, it slowly started becoming a business. And it didn't really begin to become a sophisticated business until 79, 80, 81. And it didn't mature until the mid-90s. It took that long to come up with warehouses and managers and all of the things, the trappings that we have now.
So you started by borrowing the high school theater's lights.
Correct.
How long were you borrowing lights to then start maybe purchasing your own and doing this as your 12, 13-year-old
I was in junior high school, so we did it 68 through 73.
Got it.
By borrowing. Now, we were building the odd thing, but we borrowed from 68 to 73, and I got a guy that had a driver's license to drive us around, and we got a car with a U-Haul trailer, and we hauled everything in a U-Haul trailer, sort of in a 300-400 mile radius of Kingsport, Tennessee.
How many people were helping you with this?
There were 6 of us from 1968 to 1973. It's what we call the original Bandits. And there is a 4x8 foot picture of the original Bandits in black and white here in Nashville, in our Nashville office. Sadly, 3 of those gentlemen are no longer with us. They've passed away. One of those gentlemen stayed till last year when he retired, so he was there a long, long time. And then the rest of them sort of drifted away after we got out of high school.
When we talk more about Bandit and leadership, I want to go back to that person you've worked with since you were a child.
Yep.
And I can only imagine the war stories you guys have. We're coming back to him. All right, so you just thought that this live music was cool and you wanted to get, because it's not like you had social media saying like, look what they're doing to make money, look what they're doing over there. It's just this idea, these adults doing this. Was there ever a doubt in your mind that this isn't gonna work? Or like where was your head when you were in high school? Were you thinking, I want to make this a business? Like where was your head there?
Great question, and there's sort of 2 answers to that. Number one, I'm a business guy first. I have a degree in business and a degree in law. Never took a lighting course in my life. Of course, as I said, to learn lighting by doing, there was a small group of us that sort of created concert lighting. And so Chip Monk being one of the most obvious people, Chip Monk is the guy that's the MC on Woodstock. He had a lot to do with it, as did a number of other people. But, at age 5, I was in community theater, and that's where I first saw lights. And so I knew that lights existed in theater. And the truth of the matter is, more than anything, I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be on the stage. And I took every music lesson I could take. I took flute, clarinet, piano, you name it, drums. God did not give me that talent. God gave me 0 musical ability. So here's a guy that's dying to be involved in live entertainment. And I thought, lights would be really cool. That was my only alternative at that point. So then I started doing the lighting thing. And again, no one else was doing it. But I'm the kind of guy from that day to this. And I didn't have this mantra then because it didn't exist. But I forget who coined the phrase, but if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I think it was Henry Ford. But I didn't know that at that point in time. But that's my mantra today. And that's why this is my 58th year doing this. And I've never once had a thought about not doing this or doing something different, because what we do is so much fun and so interesting. And I'm lucky to be one of those people that can say I've never had a job in my life, because I've worked in rock and roll my whole life. And I use the word rock and roll to encompass country and Christian and, everything else. But no, there's never been a moment's doubt, and that's why I'm still working. I enjoy it. Every day I get up. There was a movie years ago called All That Jazz with Roy Schneider. And in a famous scene in that movie, Roy got up, looks at the mirror and goes, "Showtime." I do that every morning when I get up. And when I get to the office, the first person I see will say, "Good morning, how are you?" And I'll go, "Showtime." and I say that every day because that's what drives me, is the whole Showtime thing. It's so exciting.
Wow. And that is going back to the gratitude, when I've been starting to wake up and first foot off the bed is thank, and the second foot is you. And then every walk to the bathroom is thank you. And if you start the day with gratitude, but that's your version of gratitude. It's showtime. I get to do this for a living. So many people want to get in this job, and yeah, that's such a beautiful. I need to start doing that. Look in the mirror, brushing the teeth. Showtime. I love it. How cool. So do you remember one of the first shows that you got involved with that was just magical to you? One of the first bands that you saw or started working with?
At that point in time, all of them were, because it was the Monkees, the Beach Boys, Parnelli Raiders, the Dave Clark Five, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. I was there in the Southeast with them, for the play and the movie that they eventually came out with. I was there for all of that. Probably one of the most compelling was the Grassroots, and most people don't remember the Grassroots, but 69, 70, 71, they were the biggest band in the world. The leader of the Grassroots was a gentleman named Warren Ettner, who to this day is one of my closest friends. Well, when the Grassroots ended, Warren became a manager. Well, he managed Faith No More, the Deftones, Rage Against the Machine, Quiet Riot, System of a Down, and we did lights for all of them because he was my friend. So through Warren, we got a lot of customers. And so that one stands out only because it's been a lifetime friendship with Warren.
When I'm talking about this industry broadly, I like to, or people that don't really know this industry, I like to mention that this industry is really only like 60 years old in general, like really, and what it is today is very recent. We know this is a word of mouth industry. We know that this is a relational industry. You probably saw that firsthand. Most of your clients were your friends who come from the artists themselves. So can you talk about how that worked, how you got your own employees? Were they friends? Like, how did that work?
In the early days, yes, it was friends at this company and every other company. It was 100% word of mouth because word got out, hey, there are these guys in Tennessee that have lights. So from, I'll say 70 until 82, 3, 4, you developed long, deep relationships with different artists, and you did everything that they did. I hooked up with Kenny Rogers when he was nobody. Hooked up with Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn and did their lights and toured with them. I hooked up with Black Oak, Arkansas, and Blackfoot and Leonard Skinner and all of these bands. And once you hooked up with them, you became part of the family. And the whole modern concept of bidding on a tour was non-existent. You were part of the family. And lighting companies had their clients, and it never changed. And yes, indeed, it was very familial in that you hired friends and family. And that didn't begin to change until the late 90s when technology got to be what it is today. And you could no longer just hire friends and family. You had to hire people that were actually qualified.
There it is. There's the difference there.
Yep.
So starting with friends and family, also I assume everything's at such a smaller scale that you are all bunking together. You're riding the buses together.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays.
No, there were no buses.
Right. Okay. Talk to me about, so you were on the road with all these bands too.
Yeah.
Tell me about going out. What was the road like? How long were you out for? Did you stay in hotels? How did that work?
There's really 3 or 4 phases to that. At the very beginning, when artists started to pick up lights, you would do the cities you could do. We would do Kingsport, Chattanooga, Johnson City, Lexington, Louisville, there was a small circle we could do. We traveled first in cars with trailers and then in Ryder trucks. And it wasn't until the 73, 74 where all of a sudden a band would sign you for a tour and you would go coast to coast and nationwide with them. Again, in the early days, up until about 77, 78, you rode in the trucks. So there would be 2 trucks and there would be 4 people, 2 in each truck. And then when you moved into a tractor trailer, that was luxury because you had a sleeper behind you. So you could put 2 guys in the 2 seats and then 2 guys in the sleeper, and you would rotate as to who got to lay down and sleep.
Oh my gosh.
And if you had 2 tractor trailers, you had 2 beds. So that went on, and then it kind of moved into Winnebagos with tractor trailers, and then came the buses. Now let's back up. Let's back up to 69, 70. When you'd work with the rock show, that was how it worked. Country artists had buses since the 50s. Countries and bluegrass people had buses since the 50s because they went out and never went home. So they would have to live on the buses. And so I'd go out and do a country tour and have a bunk, and then I'd go do a rock tour and be in a truck. And I'd be sitting with the rock people and say, you really need to look into these buses. That's actually the way to do it. 100%. Oh, that's what those country people do. Why would you have a bus? That's so redneck. I wouldn't want a bus. And I would say to them, I wouldn't knock it until you've tried it. You get on the bus, there's a driver, and you get to sleep. Eventually, it flipped, and now, of course, everyone has buses. But buses didn't become a commonplace thing until 78, 79.
So were they thinking the country folk were weak? Like what was the stereotype? If you're on a bus, why it was redneck to be in a tour bus?
Stereotype is the perfect word. Coming from the South, coming from Kingsport, Tennessee.
Yeah.
As companies began to develop, most of them were in New York and Los Angeles, but one of them wasn't, Bandit Lights. And so when we would be bidding on a tour, my competitors would go, oh, you can't use Bandit Lights. They're a bunch of hillbillies. It's a bunch of rednecks. You can't use them. They don't wear shoes in Tennessee. And we had to overcome the fact that we were from Tennessee. Not that anything they said was true, because it wasn't, but it was real easy to pigeonhole people from Tennessee as being less educated and less qualified. Wow. And that was our single biggest challenge when people ask, what was your biggest challenge throughout the 58 years? Overcoming the perception that people from Tennessee are uneducated and unqualified. Now let's fast forward to 2025. Every major manager, artist, agency, and production company in the world has an office where? Nashville, Tennessee. And what's just been built? Rock Nashville.
Oh, baby.
I mean, how things change.
Wow.
Now we knew what they didn't know, which was if you put a pin in the map where you were, and then you put pins all over the United States as to where you played, we sat in the middle of the play zone. Mm-hmm. And if your equipment was in L.A. or New York, you were on one coast or the other. If you had an emergency in Memphis, Tennessee, or Denver or Chicago, you couldn't get there in a day. Mm-hmm. The number of times that Bandit Lights bailed out our competitors where they had a problem because we were within 4, 6, 8, 10-hour drive was tremendous.
Wow.
And that's why we were there. That's why FedEx is in Memphis.
Yes.
I mean, it's all about logistics.
That is, so you were not only competing with the stereotype, but I'm sure what you had to do was just prove them wrong by saying, no, we're smart, and look what we can do, earning that business. Did you have to underprice to just get those clients, or how do you compete when people are thinking that people from the South are uneducated? Well,
again, back then it was relationship driven. So
there it is.
By the time you had the relationship with a particular artist, say Kenny Rogers, you were his guy.
Yeah.
And you would plan a tour, and then I would talk to Kenny and the management team, and we arrive at a price, and then we would go do it. There was no bidding on it. And the things that you did bid on, as it moved into the late 70s and early 80s, was there an element of price that was involved in that? Well, sure there was. But ultimately, because of physically where we were located, and by then we had Knoxville and Nashville, because of where we were located, we overcame any price difference, but because we were centrally located, and running trucks out of Nashville to most of the markets was way cheaper than running trucks out of Los Angeles.
Genius.
In fact, today very few shows emanate out of Los Angeles.
Right. And that is why.
Because
the
of
next
the
rock
logistics.
comes here to Nashville.
Yep.
That's we're so excited for that in the fall.
Absolutely.
Coming here. I want to get into Kenny Rogers. How did you meet him? How did you become his guy? How long did you production manage and work lighting for him? I want to hear just that origin story and then your life with him.
When I speak publicly to young people, I tell them there's 3 things in your life that will determine your life: opportunity, luck, and dedication, OLD. And I tell them, when you leave here, if you don't remember anything, remember the word old. Opportunities will come your way, usually because of dumb luck, and if you're dedicated enough, you'll succeed. Kenny was an example of that. Most of my success stories are rooted in that. I was in 75, I was in Las Vegas with Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. The show was over in the casino at, I don't even remember the hotel, but I came out and went in the bar right outside. Well, Kenny had been in the first edition, who were huge in the middle 60s. By now, Kenny was nobody. Kenny had long hair, and Kenny was on late night television selling the Big Dope guitar book. I mean, very embarrassing period in his life. So I go into the bar. There's a normal crowd in there having a beer, and there's this has-been on the stage named Kenny Rogers playing all the first edition hits. But he was a has-been. Somehow he knew I worked with Conway and Loretta. And he took a break and came over to my table and introduced himself. Of course, I knew well who he was. And he said, "Michael, I'm going to be a country star." Well, I found that to be interesting, but I humored him and went, "Oh, I think that'll work," and went along with it. I didn't actually think it would work. So we swapped cards and phone numbers and moved on. Well, a day or two later, I talked to the promoter for Conway and Loretta, a guy named Keith Fowler, who's long since gone. And I told Keith about this meeting. And I said, "What do you think about him?" And he said, "Mike, that cat's done made some tapes. I heard some of his tapes. I think that cat could do something." Ooh. And I said, "Well, that's weird that I bump into him and you've heard some tapes." And he goes, he got something. I think we'd be able to do something with him. Keith was from North Carolina and obviously had an accent. So fast forward a few months, and Keith and I and Kenny all get together. And at that time, I had a couple of step van vehicles that looked like the step van delivery trucks. I had a couple of those, so I gave Kenny one of those for free, and I gave him 2 people to drive it, and he put his band gear in it and his concessions. And now bear in mind, he was less than a club act at this point. And so I gave him that for free, and I paid for all of it. He paid for hotels and fuel and food. But the guys I paid and the truck I paid for. So off they go doing some dates because Keith had convinced me to believe in Kenny Rogers.
Whoa.
Well, about 6 months later, Lucille becomes just this huge hit, this monster hit. And about 3 months later than that, we're in Dallas, Texas at Reunion Arena, sold out, 20,000 tickets, Kenny Rogers with Dottie West opening, and the rest of the story. Kenny just blew wide open. So I'd known him from nobody in a bar till boom, becoming the biggest act in the world, which he did. And I was in college at the time at University of Tennessee.
What?
And yeah, I was still in college.
And you're funding his tour.
Well, I did $2 million in my senior year, gross. Gosh. I did $200,000 my senior year in high school.
Everyone needs to be taking notes.
That's gross, not net.
That's so crazy.
But anyway, I was running out of a dorm room, and so we're doing what we're doing, and everybody at UT knew who I was because I had long hair. And then I went to law school, and I'm Kenny Rogers' tour manager. Well, his plane picked me up every Thursday, and we did Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and dropped me off on Monday.
Was that the first Weekend Warrior tour ever?
Yeah, but it never stopped.
Oh.
You know, country for years did Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, Friday, but I mean 50 weeks a year.
Jeez.
You know, today's model, they go out in fits and spurts.
Right.
But country tours would do 11 months that way, and rock tours, back then, a short rock tour was 18 months. Most rock tours were 2 years. Today, people do 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. I mean, you pick up an issue today of Pollstar, and it'll announce a tour, and the tour's 6 shows. And I'm going, that's not a tour, that's 6 shows, or a residency is 4 shows. But back then, rock acts would go out for 18 to 24 months, taking off Christmas, Thanksgiving, and a week in the summer.
We are so weak.
Oh, I prefer that because you make a whole lot more money.
That is
But now, back then, tickets were $2, $3, $4. You know, today artists make a big payday per show, so they don't have the economic need to do that.
Okay, got it.
And I get it. You know, I understand it. It's more civil for the artist.
Yeah,
But that's how it began with Kenny, and
oh my gosh.
did that for years and years. And I never got a picture with him ever. And we did him right up until he passed. And right before he passed, I went and met with him and got a picture with him. It's the only one I had. And I was his production manager for years and years. Eventually, I moved into the office, but we were very, very close. And he co-signed my first ever equipment loan.
Oh my gosh.
And Conway and Loretta co-signed my first ever home loan.
Oh my. Y'all got to put all that up in frames. That is so crazy.
When Kenny did the commercial note, we went down. It was ITT Industrial Credit, Steve Deck. We went down to sign it and went into the conference room, and here was a speakerphone, and Kenny had FedExed. Didn't have that back then. Kenny had freighted his financial statements to them, and it was a leather book, 2 inches thick. So we're all around. We're at this table with Kenny's financials. I mean, the deal was done. They just wanted to make sure it was really Kenny. Well, that was crap. They just wanted to talk to Kenny Rogers. So here's the entire office staff of ITT Industrial Credit around this table going, oh, my God, it's Kenny Rogers. And Kenny comes on the phone and goes, hey, Michael. And we chat, and all these people are just, oh, it's Kenny Rogers.
Wow.
And once he verified it was him, they gave me the whopping, I think it was $100,000 loan.
And what did you purchase with that?
I don't remember. Some lights.
Some lights.
Something.
When did you start building your inventory and start calling it Bandit?
We started calling it Bandit day one in '68 because we stole the lights from the theater.
You were the 6 bandits.
Yeah, we stole the lights from the theater, hence the name Bandit. But then we put them back. And at our heyday in high school, we took them from the high school, both junior highs, and 2 movie theaters downtown.
You stole from a movie theater.
But put it back.
But put it back.
You got to remember, 68 to 71, nobody locked anything in the Deep South. Doors were always open. Churches were always open.
Yeah, for people like you.
Yeah, there is that.
Now we lock up because of the bandits.
Years later, the city of Kingsport honored me with giving me the key to the city. I mean, years later, 2008. And so when I went and spoke, there were several hundred people there, and they gave me the keys, and I told the story that I just told you. And everybody was shocked. They had no idea that because we were real quiet about it. We didn't talk about it. I mean, even when we left to go to college, we'd never told anybody.
Right.
And I started that conversation off with, I've checked, and the statute of limitations has already run on this. And everybody cracked up.
That's hilarious.
But that's where the name Bandit came from. And back then, it was Bandit Lights, Joe's Lights, Heavy Water Lights, Pig Lights. Everybody had a weird hippy-dippy name, and Bandit fit right in. Of course, today it's Electrotech, and so, it's these very technical names.
Very corporate.
Yeah, very corporate
Look
names.
at the industry turning corporate.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I mean, the reason I started gigs I had the idea for it, kind of started the idea of it 3 years ago, launched it 1 year ago, was to start professionalizing this industry in a certain way, because I felt it was time. I think a lot of people are feeling that way, but how does that feel for you since you've seen it grow? When it was just friends and family, when it was just picking your buddy up off the road to bring someone, how do you feel with where the industry is now with this more professional feel?
there's two answers to that. One is, when you say the industry, that encompasses management, artists, agents, all of the above. Obviously, Live Nation and AEG changed everything by the roll-ups and SFX before that. The number of fits and starts. There's now a really good professional model for promotion, and I think the industry has gained by that because Live Nation and AEG, Michael Rapino and Jay Marciano have done a great job of herding cats. And there are those who would not appreciate that point of view, and who would that be? Well, that would be your independent venues, because they have their own set of wants and needs and emotions about that. I think there is space for both. I became intimately familiar with how it all works as I lobbied for the industry. I was the only one before Congress doing this. So on one side you had the Live Nations and the AEGs, but on the other side you had the NEVAs and all the independent venues and independent agents and NIDO people.
Yep.
Both great people, both great missions, both well versed in what they do. Different people have different opinions on whether they can exist or coexist in the same space. And I won't try to get into those conversations.
That was the most political way I've ever heard anyone talk about. That was fabulous.
It still exists.
Right.
And I have friends on both sides of the fence, people that I love dearly on both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
And I get it. Let's move over to production. Production, 20, 25 years ago, all of these companies had a me. There was a personality to every company. Fast forward to today, there are 3 companies that aren't in one way or another rolled up into a corporate endeavor.
Yeah.
And number 1 is Bandit Lights, number 2 is Upstaging, and number 3 is Clare Brothers, of any significance. Everybody else that is a leading touring company, when I say leading, play at a very high level on a continuous basis, has been rolled up by a venture capital firm. My opinion on that is, I think this is a huge people business, and it's dependent on relationships. And when you have a corporate monolith that owes in excess of $1 billion, and most of the large corporate monoliths do have debt loads of over $1 billion,
wow,
and can't pay their bills and don't pay the vendors and don't pay their people, then I think the industry suffers, because the people on the floor, on the ground, that deliver the shows, the people that make this industry run, are last in line in the corporate model.
Yes.
They're absolutely last. And I'm very proud to say, starting in 1974, I thought I would change the industry. Everyone at Bandit, and we have 300 full-time and 200 part-time people. All the full-time people have company-funded health insurance, company-funded 401k to the federal level, which is 8%. We pay 100% of your health insurance.
Wow.
Everybody has PTO, and you can earn up to 40 days of PTO. So that's 2 months a year off.
Jeez.
We provide catered lunch every month. We provide, obviously, free clothes, free education, a whole bunch of things. We treat people like we would want to be treated. I thought in the 70s I'll change the industry and move away from the freelance model. I'm sad to say in 2025 I didn't move the needle 1 inch for 2 reasons. One, the people at the top of the various industries don't want to do it, because for every dollar that I spend, it costs me $1.32 to take care of the people.
Wow.
My competitors, for every dollar they spend, they pay them $10.99, and it costs them $1.
Yep.
And when the show's over, go home.
Exactly.
So people are forever scrapping, and so most of the big corporate companies don't want to take care of people. But the other piece is, there is a large contingent of people that enjoy being freelance.
Right.
They want to be able to do a tour with Band X and then take a month off, and a tour with Band Y. And again, the sad part is, greater than 90% of them, because I work with a number of entities and groups, they mean to get health insurance. They mean to have a 401k. They say, I'm going to do that. Sadly, very few do.
Right.
So they end up 55, 60 years old with no health insurance, severe health problems, no retirement mechanism, and then we have all those great groups of people that have come together now like Rhodey Family, who I introduced you to that young lady, Erica Pinky. A lot of people trying to help folks that have gotten sort of to the other end and then figured out, oh my goodness, I'm in a bad spot.
Yes.
And, we could have prevented that, but there was no appetite for it really on either side. So we do what we do and love the business, and will continue to do that.
Maybe when it got more corporate and more VC owned, they're not caring like olden days when you are a family. And so it really went from caring. You brought that of, I want to care about my employees. I want them to feel poured into and invested in. And as this corporatized and the VC world came, that's not bottom line. That doesn't matter. They want to make as much as possible. And that's why you see a lot of the weird fighting, the production companies fighting over different new clients. And it's definitely becoming a dog-eat-dog world in a way because of that bottom line. And then who suffers the most are the professionals, are the freelancers.
The troops on the ground.
Exactly. And yes, the model of I'm going to pick and choose what I want to do is good if you have enough work for all of that. And if you can actually time it up well, which I know most people struggle with. That's tough. How do you think this gets solved?
I spent a lot of years trying to do it. I've spoken a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. As I said, there's not a lot of buy-in, even by the freelancers, to do it. Let's look at the NFL or the NBA or any sports league. They all have NFL Players Association. That takes care of them from a medical point of view and from a retirement point of view. They sort of stand in between the league and the players and make sure that they're taken care of, simply because they can't or won't do it themselves. There is no mechanism like that for live entertainment. So what we have are all of these wonderful organizations trying to help people on the tail end.
Right.
It's almost like healthcare. There's no preventative healthcare.
Right.
There's just healthcare after the fact.
Yeah.
And I met today before I came here with two gentlemen that were onboarding as full-time people and explained all of this to them so they understand it. Because this is a life, and you do want to get to the other end and be able to retire.
Yes.
And I don't know that it will ever change because it's show business.
Showtime.
Showtime.
I don't know. This is something that I'm excited. I would love to keep this conversation going because that's kind of an idea of gigs. How can gigs, if we're the ones right now we launched a year ago and we have over 30,000 people right now, how can we actually take care of these people?
Well, and you've got a great service. We subscribe, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
And we mine your system for people.
Yep.
They are primarily freelance people because that's how the business works. But there is no Bandit without the people. There is no Bandit. When COVID hit, we laid no one off. We gave no pay cuts. We didn't change benefits.
Wow.
I mean, we blew right through it. And no one else in the production space did that. No one.
Wow.
I defy anybody to call me and say they did, because I know that they didn't, because I had this 1.3 million person email chain. And of course I was emailing every day and talking and meeting. I did over 500 podcasts in 18 months, testified twice before the Senate. So I met all kinds of people, and everybody got laid off. Everybody. And except us. We kept everybody on full pay with full benefits.
Wow.
And it paid off. And I worked hand in hand. I helped write the CARES Act. I helped write PPP. I helped write PPP2. I helped write ERC, Employee Retention Credit. And then I spent a lot of time before Congress and Senate. I met all four members of leadership, and I let them understand what 1099 looked like. Because when this began, 1099 people could participate in none of those programs.
Right.
And I was one of three people that changed Congress's mind and let freelancers enjoy those benefits.
Thank you.
And
I got it. So thank you so much.
We spent more time on that probably than anything else. And once we showed Congress, they believed when COVID hit, there was no sympathy for us. If you remember watching television, you saw hair salons and gyms and restaurants on TV. Why? People understand those. There was sympathy for them. Everywhere I went, the attitude was zero sympathy, followed by, well, you work for those really rich pop stars. They should take care of you. And then I would explain, that's not how it works. When we work for a big pop star, it's a contract situation. We do 10 months, the tour's over, and you go home. And even with educating them, I sat down with Pelosi and Schumer and Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy individually, spoke with them individually multiple times, and I know they got it, but it still really didn't matter. Now, at the end of the day, we got $16.25 billion for the industry through Save Our Stages, but we needed more, and again,
$16.2 billion.
$16.25 billion.
Excuse me. And you got that dispersed through PPPs and through...
No, that was purely through Save Our Stages, SVOG.
Jeez Louise.
That was just the SVOG piece.
How long did it take to pass that?
We started that endeavor March the 13th of 2020, and we got it passed December 28th or 9th of that same year.
Jeez. This episode is brought to you by Gigs, the platform built for the live event industry. Whether you're a touring pro, an AV tech, or backstage crew just trying to get a job, Gigs is where you find real jobs from real employers. And if you're hiring, it's the easiest way to connect with vetted professionals who actually show up ready to work. Right now, we've got over 30,000 vetted professionals and thousands of companies already using Gigs, hiring successfully. What are you waiting for? Head to gigs.live to sign up today and take control of your career. Did you have any previous political experience, or was this just going in, you're passionate about it, No,
I on every board there is at University of Tennessee, and I had lobbied at the state and federal level for the university, plus I ran the Chamber of Commerce in Knoxville for 4 years, and I've kind of lived in the political world forever and ever. There's three forms of entertainment. There's the entertainment that we work in, there's sports, and there's politics, and to me they're all the same. You've got someone or a group of people trying to sell themselves to someone else for a ticket or money or some reason, and there is no difference. And when you go backstage at a rock show, who do you see back there? Sports figures and politicians.
Oh my goodness.
And when you go to a political event, who do you see backstage? Sports figures and rock stars. I mean, they all want to be one another. Rock stars want to be sports stars and or politicians. Politicians want to be rock stars or sports stars. I mean, think about it. They're all kind of one.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's all entertainment.
It is. It really is.
It really is.
Congratulations and thank you from our industry for getting that done. I mean, I think the sympathy isn't there because they just assume everyone's job is so fun and glitz and glamoury and all the things and like party. I remember when I wanted to get into this industry, what people thought it was, and it's not that. And so getting the sympathy for a very cool job, I can imagine, was difficult to wrap your head around.
We never got any sympathy. And I will go on record as saying, here are some of the key people that got all of that done. Dana Frank created NEVA and represented that sort of swath of the market and did a phenomenal job. Of course, I was overarchingly by far the most active person trying to speak for everybody. And one of the things that got lost because it was transparent, but Michael Rapino from Live Nation and Jay Marciano from AEG and Corin Capshaw from Red Light, those guys were animals. Now, being publicly traded and whatnot, they couldn't actively do things. But we had an email chain with Michael and myself and Jay and Corin. And we emailed every day and we talked quite often. And I was on the way home early on in COVID, and I was pulling up Wayne Forte, the agent, was also very, very important in this. I'm on the way home and I pull up to a Zaxby's to get a salad, and Wayne says, what we ought to do is we ought to set up shot stations nationwide. And I said, well, we could never do that, Wayne. And he goes, well, Corin's already doing it. Corin owns an old Walmart in Charlottesville. And I said, no, tell me about it. So he told me about it. He said, yeah, he's giving shots at this old Walmart. Whoa. So I said, hang up, I'm going to call Corin. So I hung up and called Corin. I says, tell me what you're doing. And he had an old Walmart. They put tents out front, and they were giving jabs in the parking lot. So I went back and emailed that group and said, hey, how about we work together to connect venues and such to give shots nationwide in 10 days. Because of those people, I reached out to the NFL and got Roger Goodell on the phone. I reached out to NASCAR and got the NASCAR people on the phone. And in 10 days, we had all the Live Nation venues, all the AEG venues, all the NFL stadiums, and all the NASCAR stadiums. And 10 days later, we've got shot clinics nationwide giving jabs. I went to Bristol, Tennessee to the racetrack up there because they were part of the NASCAR family. And NBC met me up there and filmed. And here I am talking about what we've been able to do. And you can see cars lined up as far as you can see with people turning up to get jabs. And that happened nationwide, all over the place. And we did it in 10 days. You know, we reached out to Jeffrey, at the time Jeffrey Zients was the COVID czar. He was then later the White House chief of staff for President Biden. Mm-hmm. But Jeffrey worked with us and introduced us to FEMA, and I met weekly with the 10 FEMA regional directors on a Zoom call and put that whole thing together and continued it and got all of these shot clinics going. The one thing that was sad about all of that, no matter what we did, no matter how hard we tried, the underserved communities had a hesitancy going into it. And we didn't really penetrate them as much as we needed to. And believe me, we tried. But other than that, we had a really, really good run and got a bunch of great stuff done. And I thank all those people for that.
Wow. Did you use Live Nation and AEG employees too to administer, or how did that? How you use the venues, and did you basically any of these people who were just waiting for their jobs to come back? Were you able to use any of those?
Yeah,
wow.
we wrapped in a whole bunch of industry people through those various entities, and then my 1.3 million person email chain. I emailed the industry and shared the data with them, and a lot of people turned up in their cities and volunteered and whatnot. So yes, that was the play, was that the industry people knew the facilities and knew how to make this work. So you weren't having to train people to run the facility. You had the facility people there, plus local people in every market.
Right.
And we reached out to people like Jake Berry and Marty Hom and other people of that nature in their markets, and they chimed in and helped. And so we got all this stuff going.
Yeah.
And it was just absolutely amazing. I spoke every week to the IAVM, International Association of Venue Managers. I spoke every week on their Zoom call for 30 minutes for probably 4 months. So I was speaking to all the venue managers every week, giving them the political situation, the medical situation, and anything else I could share, because I sat in the middle of it all.
My gosh. First thing that comes to my mind is, well, I mean, you're an action taker. It's clear you were 12 and you started a business. But I guess I think that a lot of younger people especially might have this hesitancy to just go and do something. Because when you were telling that story, I was thinking, how do you get the idea that quickly of, oh, we can help, look at what we can do, and then just take action and make it happen? You know, I'm very inspired by that. What advice would you give to people who might be a little hesitant, knowing that, oh, well, what if it doesn't work, or whatever it is? But I mean, how do you combine the good thinking, good ideas, and then just taking action and seeing what happens?
Fairly simple. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And when Wayne said that to me that night in the car, it just hit me. We have the venues, we have all the infrastructure, and they have the medicine.
There it is.
So we just put the medicine together with the rock and roll infrastructure, bringing in football and bringing in NASCAR, because it's all entertainment, isn't it? We're selling tickets and people go to arenas, and we got phenomenal buy-in.
Wow. When did live music start for you guys? When did Bandit get to start back up?
In a small way, we began back in July of, believe it or not, of 20. There were people that started going back out. And then if you remember, the second round of COVID hit. What did they call it? It had a name.
Omicron?
No. They had a name they gave to the second round. I forget what it was, but
it was Delta or Omicron, something like that,
something,
right?
Yeah, something.
Oh my God, I didn't ever think I was going to have to think about that again.
But
okay.
we had a little bit of stuff going, as did a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then here came round two, and it all kind of shut back down again.
Right.
But then we started up in a much more robust fashion in February of 21, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then through 21, it sort of came back to normal. Of course, at that point in time, you had all kinds of mask protocols and
dogs.
Just different kinds of protocols that you had to deal with. Of course, we're completely beyond that now, but
Praise God. And I mean, then you had new job, actually. I had to be the COVID compliance officer for a lot of different venues and a lot of different gigs that I was getting. It was wild. I think we're all, talking about it has given me some scary flashbacks.
Probably out of all that, what my biggest takeaway was, I developed, with a 1.3 million person email chain, I developed a lot of new friends. And I would end up on the end of a phone call with somebody that was suicidal. And that happened a lot. Mm-hmm. I had 35, 40 people drive to my home in Knoxville to spend the weekend with me because they were so emotionally devastated. And I'd say, come on down, I'll feed you, I'll talk to you. And I mean, I had one couple that came from California twice. They would drive a day or two and then stop, and she would work as a waitress, get some money, and then drive a little while farther, stop, do something, get some money. They came twice because they had lost everything. And I got to know a lot of people, great people that lost everything. And that forever sticks with me. And I've got probably 100 good friends that I pulled out of that became good friends that I didn't know. And just sort of interesting life stuff.
That's so beautiful. And when they lost everything, when the industry came back, did they want to step back into that industry, or did they find other opportunities? You know, what was the advice that you gave them when they were so down?
Some people did, some people didn't. I mean, it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
You know, some people they just said, okay, I'm going to go work at Amazon or Walmart. We lost 30% of the workforce on the production side that never came back because they had never had health insurance or retirement, and they went and worked at Amazon or wherever. And they said, you know, I'm good. I'm 51 years old. I've got a job with health insurance and 401k. I'm not going back to show business.
Totally.
So we lost 30% of the people.
That's why we need to work to get them back.
Yeah, that kind of changed the dynamic. But the strength of any company is the people, and you need to realize that. It isn't the corporation. It isn't me. It isn't Bandit. It isn't Bandit's money. It's the people. Yeah. Because there is no Bandit without the wonderful, amazing guys and gals that we've got.
Of course, we lost a lot, 30%, because the show stopped. But what about...
Well, 30% never came back.
Sorry, never came back. But the show stopped. Everyone took a break and are back out. But I think, you know, those mental health issues were always there, are still there. You know, I would love to talk about kind of what you think about current state of our industry. What do you see for mental health in our industry right now, and where do you see it going?
It's not very different than any industry. If you look at starting with baby boomers and going to what's today, Gen
A?
Whatever the newest one is, the things that were important to baby boomers are irrelevant to the latest generation. One of the things that the latest generation values is free time, flexibility, time off, being able to call my own shots, that kind of thing, which plays into freelance.
Aha.
So whereas baby boomers had learned from their parents, you know, the World War II greatest generation ever had learned you need job security, you need a steady paycheck, you need health insurance, you need retirement. So there's been this phenomenal arc to get where we are now, and there's very few core values in between the two, and there's multiple charts that show you all the generations and what they did and didn't like. But where we are today and what we work with at Bandit and what the world works with is when you have people that value time off more than anything, value being able to set their own schedule more than anything, value working remotely very highly, and then you try to overlay that onto all types of work. Some places it works, and some places it doesn't. I'm on the board at UT Medical Center, and everybody went remote except doctors and nurses during COVID, and then we slowly started to bring people back. Well, prior to COVID and now, the only people that we had that can work remote are what we call coders. Coders get all the paperwork from the medical procedures, and everything has a code. For instance, a tonsillectomy is 103752-5. I mean, I made that up.
I was about to say, come on.
You know, everything has a code.
Okay.
So these coders can sit at home and do that because they have metrics. All we care about as a hospital is that you produce, you code 1,000 records a day or whatever the number is. So we don't care what hours, what time, or where you do it, as long as you correctly code. So our coders are still remote, but everything else couldn't be that way. And that's kind of where we've gotten. Working from home became normal during COVID, but now it isn't. And you've heard all the stories about the companies insisting people come back. Well, I got to know Jamie Dimon during COVID, and we compared notes and we talked. And he went through this transition. He first noticed that JP Morgan was down 82%. So then they began to track the keyboards. And he found out that people weren't working.
Yeah.
Well, tracking the keyboards violates all those emotions. How dare you track me? And a lot of those people came up with the software that makes it look like you're talking. So the next thing Jamie did, and I talked to him about this, the next thing he did was he put cameras on top of the computers. That created this big invasion of privacy moment where, how dare you, I'm at home, you're invading. Well, then he FedExed everybody a green screen to stand behind them, which completely defeated the you are interrupting my privacy. And then eventually, and this was on the news, he just said, come to work or else.
There it is.
And some people went to work and some didn't. But that transition in mindset, you know, some companies can do it, some companies can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. And that ties into mental health because I was involved as an advisor, if you will, in another company. And we had, I'm involved in a lot of companies, but we had 14 people pre-COVID, and then we have four people now. And we found out that the 14 people, when they started working remote, would have 2 and 3 jobs.
Oh, my gosh.
And if we threatened to fire them, they said, well, we don't care. We'll just get another one, because everybody was working remote at that time. And these were largely computer jobs. So, you know, it's all about mindset and what you're looking for. I think we're on the downhill slope of the remote work stuff. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not going to say. I don't know. But it is lessening. But that mindset of what's important to me is free time and time off and personal space, you know, those kind of things. That's very, very real.
Totally.
And then it ties into the mental health issue. And there's 2 kinds of mental health people. There's those people that have mental health issues because they've lost a loved one, they've lost their job, they've lost their car, they've lost money, you know, very real things. Then there's other people that just struggle with their mental health because of their inability to cope with the reality that they're sitting in.
Right.
And I'm not being critical of them. They're in a reality that isn't comfortable to them.
Absolutely.
And all that has to be addressed.
Well, the remote work is interesting because I think it puts more work on the managers and on the boss, because then you have to figure out the right KPIs that makes sure that they're working. Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for sure.
And of course, you've got all the great people, Chris Lyle and the people at TCW now, Echo Live, doing the counseling at the festivals and whatnot for those people that struggle.
Yes.
You know, if you went back even 10 years and suggested there be counselors at a rock festival, people would laugh at you. But today, again, it's very real, because you have guys and gals at these shows that, for whatever reason, become mentally overwhelmed, and something's got to be done about it. And you know, God bless Chris and the team at Echo Live for what they're doing. It's amazing work.
Couldn't agree more. And that's, very interesting. And I do wonder about the routing. Again, I whenever I talk to people, especially young people, about day of show is never going to change. It's going to be an 18-hour day.
And the show's at 8 o'clock.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And then your artist might play until midnight or whatever it is. Like, that isn't going to change. If that's not for you, this whole industry is not for you. But maybe routing, maybe number of shows is going to change and makes it more manageable for people coming into the industry to have a life, to have a family, whatever it is. When did you start a family with you being on the road constantly?
I made a choice not to have a family until I could financially and every other way afford to, so I didn't have a child until I was 44.
Incredible. Okay. Wow. So is that when you got off the road?
Oh, yeah, I was long since off the road, but still traveling a bunch. I mean, I got off the road, heck, I was under 30 when I got off the road. So, but I was running a pretty big enterprise with offices all over the world and traveling a lot. And I continued after I have two wonderful sons, Chase and Cole, and I continued to travel a lot, and that necessitated buying an airplane and so on and so forth. But I ended up coaching Pee Wee basketball and Pee Wee football and Boy Scouts and did all those things. But I never stopped Bandit because I'm a workaholic. I work 18 hours a day. I sleep 4 hours a night because I just wake up. And my mind's running. And what can I do today? That kind of thing.
What do you want to do today?
Bandit's just getting bigger, getting better, treating people better, having better benefits, and growing the company. And we're also modernizing our systems. My son Chase is involved in that.
Yeah.
And we're modernizing systems to make people's lives easier. You can now request a day off on your cell phone, and it takes 2 punches of a button because the phone knows who you are, and it's tied to your direct supervisor as well as HR. And in seconds, you request a day off, and literally in seconds, you're either approved or denied. So those kinds of things to make people easier, make their lives easier.
Yeah.
And but I'm involved in so many other endeavors. I'm chairman of the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And heavily involved in women's basketball. I used to be a partner in Skycam, the flying camera. I got out of that after 4 or 5 years. We sold out. I used to own Thomas Truss and Tomcat Truss, the world's leading truss manufacturers at the time.
Wow.
I used to own Avo, the world's leading control company, but I sold that years ago. So I'm forever dipping my toe into things. I had a company called Authentic Stars where we put rock and roll merchandise into Walmarts. And we did that for 5 years. And then we sold that company. So I'm always coming up with weird stuff. I've got a property management company, an aviation company, just different things that keep you busy doing stuff. And it's all kind of transparent. And heavily involved at the University of Tennessee and all of these different boards. And just helped establish the new College of Music at UT, which we never had. It's now a year old.
Wow.
My son Chase is on the board. And my goal is to marry the College of Business to the College of Music. Because of all those College of Music graduates, 95% of them will never play first violin in the New York Philharmonic. They will mostly get other jobs. So we're educating them that for every one person on stage, there's 50 to 75 people behind them. And we're letting them know when you finish in the College of Music, you can fill one of these support roles if the music career doesn't work out. And that's no different than college football. 0.008% of the people that play college football play in the league.
Whoa. And
they know that. But they play anyway.
Of course.
So, but they also know there's other things to do in the sporting world. Yes. Whereas we're educating the UT College of Music people to the fact there's these other things to do.
Like what?
Manager, agent, promoter, producer, light person, sound person. You pick it.
It's so cool seeing that pop up around the country at so many different universities now. Do you think that someone could go straight from high school into this industry?
Oh, they do. They do at Bandit. We have an outreach program. We work with MTSU. We work with Belmont. We work with Ohio State, University of North Carolina School for the Arts, Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. We work with a bunch of colleges, but we often have high school people. We've got two that just came to us. And we find that most of the high school kids are self-taught and know a whole bunch when they get there.
Right.
And they sort of start at the bottom and move up.
I love that. I think there needs to be a whole new trend of that because why not?
Right now we've got 22 interns across the multiple offices.
Wow.
And some of them will stick and some of them won't.
What do you look for?
Drive and passion.
Have you ever met anyone with your sense of, what is it, OLD? What is it?
Yeah, opportunity, luck, and dedication.
There it is. Have you met anyone with or who comes to mind when you think of people with a similar drive and dedication as you?
Oh, a bunch of people. And the 4 biggest influences in my adult life, first, in no order, just first, Pat Summitt, the late, great Lady Vols basketball coach, changed my life. What dedication, what focus, what drive, what desire changed my life. The women's athletic director, who was her boss, Joan Cronin, grace in motion. And the two of them as a tandem defined and created women's basketball, which is why I'm on the Hall of Fame board. Those two forever steer my life. Third is Garth Brooks. What an animal. What an absolute animal. Met the guy in '87, been with him ever since. Don't ever say no to the man. If he asks you a question, don't tell him that we can't do it or why we can't do it. Tell him what you can do. You know, it's the real can-do attitude. That's why he's the biggest artist in the world. He just can do. And then finally, Barry Switzer, who was the Oklahoma football coach, and then the Dallas Cowboys football coach, and one of 3 people to win both a college national championship and a NFL championship. Just a great, great guy. Drive, go, go, go. Right now he's 85 years old. We talk every day. He's still working and going, and he inspires me. So all 4 of those people are big inspirations in my life.
Yeah.
And just go and just never stop. There's a bunch of other people out there like that. And we got a bunch of them at Bandit Lights.
Yeah.
And there's other ones in the industry, but you know, and that doesn't mean that's for everybody. Some people don't want to work that much, and that's great. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I wish maybe I was that way, but I can't imagine not producing.
Right.
I just can't. You've got to have 2 things in life. Everybody, you've got to have purpose and hope. And I've got both. And to me, if I quit working, I got no purpose.
What is hope to you?
Hope to me means that you are eternally optimistic that you can and will achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. The second you give up on that, it's difficult, if not impossible, to achieve, whether it's with your family or in your church or in your business, whatever it may be. You've always got to carry that hope with you. But hope can't be a business plan.
I think that is such an amazing place to kind of end and just do a quick few rapid fire questions that I like to end episodes with. First concert that you ever attended?
That I remember?
That you remember.
Andy Williams.
All right. Do you remember where?
Johnson City, Tennessee, at the university.
Amazing. What is your favorite tour that you ever worked on?
Anything that Garth Brooks does.
Copy that.
When you say worked, I'm the company.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. What's the most rewarding part of a show day? Or your favorite
of a
part
show
of
day?
the show day?
When the house lights go down and our lights come up and the crowd goes nuts because we're part of that. Mm-hmm. You know, the lights are part of that. People go to see a show. They don't go to hear a show. Nobody ever says to you, you want to go hear David Bowie tonight? You want to go see David Bowie tonight.
True that. So, I will say that's pretty much every single person's answer to that question is when the house lights go down, which, by the way, you changed it, or were one of those who changed it from house lights being just the lights. So that's pretty epic. Best piece of advice you got early on?
Kenny Rogers' story. Couple 3 years into being big, I very nervously went into the dressing room to sell him half my company for $100,000 as a way to raise funds. And he listened to my whole spiel and he said, is Bandit great? Yeah. Is Bandit wonderful? Yeah. Is Bandit all that in a bag of chips? Yeah. I mean, he asked me all these, asked me all these questions. And he goes, I got one question. I said, okay. And he goes, if Bandit's all that you say it is, why in the hell would you sell half of it to me for $100,000?
Wow.
That was a life-changing moment. I went, never thought about that. I was just looking for income, to grow the company.
Of course.
And I didn't, and I've never sold out since. And believe me, we've had offers.
Uh-huh.
But I know if I ever sold the company, they'd gut the people, they'd wrap the assets in, they'd take the client base, and that would be that. And the people would suffer.
There it is. It would be bottom line, not people.
Exactly.
You got to keep that vision. Wow, that's incredible. And one piece of advice that you would give to every young person coming into this industry?
Never quit. Never quit if you want to succeed. Very simple. We created a word 35 years ago called humanomics, which is human and economics together. We make all decisions based on what's good for people, not what's good for the bottom line. Bottom line is actually the third thing we look at. And I tell my people all the time, it's worked so far. Mm-hmm. We don't chase dollars. We chase people. And the dollars come.
And there it is. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. I could ask you a million more questions. So we'll have to do this again. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And keep up doing what you're doing. Keep up the good work, because it's very, very vital, and you're providing a great service to the industry. And we're probably both amazed nobody ever thought about this before.
Yeah, no one was stupid enough to do it for this long, at least. But thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Nikki.
All right, this is our new segment called Ask Gigs, where I'm answering your questions that the gigs community has written in to the best of my ability. We got a question from Maggie, who lives in Nashville. What's the best way to create your own rates as a new freelancer? What I would suggest, and again, this is just from me, so I know a lot of other people will have ideas about this. I would say, if they ask you what your rate is, I would suggest saying, what do you think is fair for this position? They will give you a number, and then you say, think about it. If it's fair for you, if it's not, you're going to make more money doing other things. All right, fine, but you might not get your next gig. So I would say take whatever they give you, and then you can earn the right to have a set rate. But it takes some time and some credibility, and then eventually you'll be around people where you can start asking, like, hey, what do you think I should have my day rate be? I remember I was like 3 years into working in the industry, and someone asked me what my rate was, and I told them, and they go, no, it shouldn't. This is what it should be. Like, way higher than I even expected. Question from Giacomo, living in Milan, Italy. Best tips for someone that wants to enter the live event and music industry. I'm going to tell you this right now. Go listen to podcast episode 7, which is titled 18 Ways to Enter the Live Event Industry. And I give you 18 ways to enter. So go listen to that. Next question from Jennifer. How do you keep your feminine energy when you're surrounded by guys on tour? What a question. Find what's natural for you. If someone's upset that you're a woman around them and they want to make gross jokes, you can just remove yourself from it. You don't have to yell at them, whatever. And they're annoyed by that. Maybe find a new camp, whatever. I mean, there's plenty of great people in this industry that love working with women who are any type of feminine or whatever it is. So it's just up to you. I know at first I started conforming. I know at first other men and women told me that I should be like dressing and acting like a man, but ultimately I found myself, and I'm very girly, and that's okay too. So if you got any more questions, drop them on our socials at gigs.live, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Email us at info@gigs.live. If you have any podcast guests that you want to see on the show, please let us know. Reach out. If there's anything specific, job or specific questions or whatever you want to hear on this podcast, I'm so excited to hear from you guys. And if you're not a member yet, apply to join the Gigs Network, please, if you haven't already. Employers, sign up at employers.gigs.live. Professionals, sign up at gigs.live and start posting your jobs, find new jobs. If you are not on Gigs already and you're listening to this podcast, what are you doing? Come on now, gigs.live, and be a part of our Gigs community today.